Hello, everyone. I'm Lillian, and Tiffany, Lisa, and Westmore will be presenting some case studies where mobile technology has been used in STEM and language learning. First, STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEM is receiving a lot of attention right now because STEM skills are considered essential to maximizing Canada's economic competitiveness and productivity. Consequently, government, education, and business leaders have been concerned whether Canadians have these skills. My colleagues will each discuss mobile learning in STEM and language learning and present a couple cases to help you think about how mobile technology may be integrated to enhance STEM skills in your school or organization. First, let's talk to Tiffany. She's going to share with us some of the research that she's found about math. So Tiffany, would you tell us about your case study?
Hey, thanks. So this case study that I'll be talking about is about mobile math educators, and student engaged in mobile learning by Franklin and Pang. So this case study focused on the use of iPod Touch in two 8th grade classrooms to help students learn about algebraic equations, specifically slope, absolute value, and elimination. The students' goal was to create math videos that were then able to be played on iPods to create that anytime, anywhere learning mobile environment. So what happened was two math educators received 12 hours of professional development on how to use the iPod Touch and iTunes to download movies and music onto them. For both the students and educators, they used iMac computers, Microsoft Office version 2003, iMovie, and Adobe Photoshop. To upload their materials onto their iPod Touch, there was a computer with Windows XP and version 7.6 of iTunes. Now, the plan was for this study to take 18 hours in 3 weeks.
So Tiffany, what were some of the findings from this study?
Yeah, for sure. So there is actually negative and positive outcomes of this. The negative part was that the process of making the videos, the students and educators noticed that they needed a lot of technology support since many of the sites were blocked, so then they had to send requests to the principal for approval, and this ended up wasting a lot of instructional time and actually discouraged the students as well. Also, when they were using the iPod Touches, they needed to find electrical outlets to charge their iPod Touches. Also, to connect and synchronize the video to the iPod Touches, there was some difficulty, which also shortened instructional time. Also, many of the students felt that this project was more about learning how to use the iPods than learning math. And for the classes that didn't have the iPods, the teachers and their classes did find it distracting. Now, there were positive outcomes to this study as well. The educators, student, school administrator, and university faculty that observed this study, they were impressed by the students' ability to use the iPod Touch to build math videos and to present that math concept visually. They also noticed that there was a better understanding of math concepts since the students had to create their iPod Touch videos. However, there does need to be further research on using and creating videos for mobile devices as a helpful resource for teaching. There was also one more positive thing that did come out of the study was that when they interviewed students, a student did mention that they were able to learn a math concept during lunch since he was watching the math videos on their iPod Touch.
And was CSAM evident in this study?
Yeah, so it was definitely collaborative because students worked together to create math videos for the iPod Touch. Situated wasn't so much because in creating these math videos on algebraic equations, it was unclear whether or not the students were able to link real-life applications to solving for slope, absolute values, and elimination. It was definitely active, though, since the students were active with the iPod Touch and learning math content both inside and outside the classroom. Mobile, yeah, for sure. This case study definitely meets the criteria of mobile learning since students were able to access the math videos on their iPod Touch. However, it was also noted that it was unfortunate for the students since they weren't able to keep their iPod Touch.
Thanks, Tiffany. Next, we're going to hear from Lisa. Lisa, would you tell us how mobile learning has been used in teaching science?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about a study where Researchers use touchscreen technology, apps, and blogs to engage and sustain high school students' interest in chemistry topics. So the study was conducted by Kim, Chaco, Zhao, and Montclair in 2014, and it was based on the use of blogging on iPads with a group of female underrepresented high school students. The goal of the study was to see if blogging, in addition to a technology-rich chemistry program, would increase students' understanding and interest in chemistry and careers in STEM. So the teacher had support from college mentors to design and administer the course, and together the team chose the areas where students had the most difficulty in chemistry and created 3 modules: molecules, balancing equations, and nuclear chemistry. There were 4 classes with an average of 17 students per class. Students were randomly selected for each class, and 2 classes were used as the experimental group, while the other 2 were the control group. Both groups used the same apps and modules. The only difference was that blogging was central to the experimental group's program. During the module, students in the experimental group worked through problems and shared their answers with their peers on the course blog. Work on the blog was considered part of the class participation grade. Modules started with an introduction by the teacher about the topic and information from the college mentors about the technical aspects of the activity that they would be doing. Students could work independently or collaborate with their peers. iPads were chosen to be used for the blogging and the coursework because researchers found in previous studies that touchscreen technologies increase student engagement. So the way that the course was set up was there are 3 modules, and for the first module, the Lewis Dots app was used. So students used the app to make molecules and explore interatomic bonding. Students were able to use the blog to post pictures of the molecules that they had created, and they were also required to answer questions, complete a chemistry puzzle, and post their work in the app using screenshots on the blog. The second module in the course focused on balancing equations and students using the Balancing Equations app. Students used the app to balance various equations that were presented in random order, and they could choose how many equations they wanted to balance per session. And then the students would be presented with an equation, and then they had to drag and drop the correct numbers into the spaces. And then when complete, the app allowed students to check their answers and then also make the corrections where necessary. And then once the students had practiced, they took a 10-minute test consisting of 10 questions using Google Docs survey. And once the results were submitted to the instructors, a summary of test results were then posted on the blog, and students were then asked to submit their response to the module and test results. The final module was nuclear chemistry. And in this module, students were instructed to watch 2 online videos, and then they answered questions about the content using a Google Docs survey. And then again, a summary of responses were posted on the blog for students to respond to. Students were able to work independently or in groups, and then after the completion of each module, students completed evaluations which were used to improve subsequent models.
And what were some of the conclusions in your case study?
So when student progress was evaluated, the group that used the blog performed better than the group that did not use the blog. So the average grades were higher. And the researchers felt that blogging resulted in slightly higher performance based on the data from each module and the analysis of students' grades, and also analysis of the students' grades who were most active on the blog. The group that used blogging felt that they participated in discussion about the content, whereas the control group felt that their contributions were limited to asking questions during class. The data was collected using the end-of-module surveys, and both groups indicated similar interest in STEM fields at the beginning of the course, but by the end of the course, the level of interest from the experimental group increased, as did their class participation, whereas the controlled group participation fluctuated based on the subject matter, as did their interest in STEM.
And would you say CSAM was evident in this study?
Yeah, so when we analyzed it using the CSAM framework, we found that blogging provided a great platform for students to collaborate with one another. They were able to look at each other's work, ask questions, and work together on assignments. And use of the apps allowed students to see, to experience the subject areas more deeply, especially when they could build molecules and watch videos. Activities allowed students a high degree of participation with the content because the apps and blog were very interactive. Students were also able to do activities that were non-traditional in class, such as hands-on manipulation and watching online videos about content. The blog also allowed students to share their work in unique ways with each other.
Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Finally, we're going to hear from Westmore, who's going to discuss mobile technology use in language learning. Language learning has been included because research by the Canadian Council of Academies found that STEM skills alone were not sufficient for productivity growth. Communication was another important factor. Westmore, would you share with us how mobile learning has been used in language development?
Okay, so what we're going to do is, we're going to look at this case here. The case was done by Joe Tarantino, and what he wanted to do is examining the effects of mobile-assisted language learning, or also referred to as MAL, on vocabulary recall and listening comprehension. The study examines the effect of the use of iPads in preschool-age children for independent language learning. It was a 6-month study that looked at the participants' preferred use of the apps to see if they make any advancements in vocabulary recall and listening comprehension. There is research that indicates that these devices can have a positive impact on second language learning and their vocabulary recall. And using multimedia messages through mobile phones was effective. And the flexibility provided through mobile phones can also allow for things like vocabulary flashcards to be beneficial for second language learners. And this study looks at, like I said, this study looks at the use of iPads for language learning at the preschool level. As most studies you're probably aware of, most of the research is done with post-secondary students. So this study here was done at a private school in the United States. They selected 7 students, 4 girls and 3 boys. These students either owned an iPad or they were in agreement to purchase one. And on each iPad, they were given 5 free Spanish apps to use for 15 minutes a day over a 6-month period. Now, to measure the increase or decrease in vocabulary recall and listening comprehension, there was a pre-test that was of 23 words that was done. And the apps that they chose for this study contained that basically focused on animal vocabulary. And the reason why they chose this animal vocabulary is because this was a topic that most students were familiar with based on the diagnostics that they've done. And also, as far as student engagement, it was ones that they actually enjoyed. Also, too, another thing is that the background survey revealed that the students had minimal exposure to the iPads and that the parents of these children were middle class and most of them college educated. Now, there were 4 questions that in this research, so I'll just mention them here for you. First one was, when, where, and how do preschool-age children participate in independent iPad-based language learning? Second one was for the choice of Spanish apps available for the iPad. Which apps do preschool children prefer for independent language learning? And what are the common characteristics of these apps? Third question was, what level did the preschool-age children able to show increases in animal vocabulary recall resulting from independent language learning? And the last question was, what level did the preschool-age children show increase in listening comprehension and animal vocabulary resulting from independent language learning?
And what results were observed in your study?
Okay, so in these findings, I'm going to break it down based on the questions that we had, the research questions. So based on questions 1 and 2, from those observations and the activity logs, and also there's an interview process that was done, The use of the iPads mostly occurred at home or in the car. So as far as learning outside the classroom, the thing that was interesting was the parents really liked the flexibility of the iPad. So, and this is also because the iPads were very mobile. It was easy to carry. If you had internet access to a remote location, you could use it. So that they found that very useful. And also, what they found is that the students averaged about 23 minutes a day. Minimum was 15, so they actually used it for more than 8 minutes more than what was required. And they used it 5 days a week. And what they also found is that the students were able to navigate through the iPad with ease, requiring little assistance from their parents. So after a few days, they were able to really be engaged independently using these devices. And so it's just a way of showing that there was a lot of engagement involved. They also preferred, of the 5 apps, the ones that were game-like were the ones that they were most interested in. And also, if they had a touch screen, so if it was just like a flashcard where they just watched a video or something like that, or Word, they weren't that interested. But if it required them to touch the screen and to choose something, they found that much more engaging. For questions 3 and 4, we're looking at vocabulary recall and listening comprehension. For the vocabulary recall, we did a pre-test of 23 words. The pre-test score was only 1.71. And then after using the iPads during the 6-month study, their post-test score was about 12.86. So there was an actual average increase of 11.5 vocabulary items. And students who had actually prior exposure to the language that they were learning, they scored, of course, higher. They scored close to 17. Now, for the listening comprehension, once again, the pre-test score was 9, and the post-test score was 18. So pretty much the same increase as the vocabulary recall, 11.15. Some of the limitations that they talked about in this study, one was the sample size. It was only 7 students. So when you look at the scalability of it, you wonder how well this would work in a larger classroom and how effective it will be. There's also the 6-month duration of the study. Doesn't really tell us the meaningfulness of these results with respect to vocabulary recall and listening comprehension. It was just one period. So if you extended it longer, would you see the same increase? Or if it was during a period of time, like say towards the end of the school year, where you did such an assessment, would you get that same increase or that same engagement? And the last one, the apps used in the study were only measuring vocabulary content. So there were no results to demonstrate linguistic skills or grammar formation.
And would you consider that CSAM was evident in this study?
Yes, to a certain degree. However, only because this was at the preschool level and because this is more of an introductory lesson, it was very hard for them to work collaboratively. The only way I would see them working collaboratively is once they became independent on using the iPads. If I found that the students they would come back to class and they would work together. Sort of do an activity where if it was game-based, they would sort of make it a sort of contest or a game activity amongst each other to see who could score more in terms of vocabulary recall.
Thank you, Westmore.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank Tiffany and Lisa for sharing your case studies. We'd like now to invite our viewers to visit our website where you'll find more case studies. We'd also like to leave you with a question. Have these case studies changed your view of mobile technology in STEM and language learning, and how? Please post your comments by clicking on the link below. Thank you.